Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the HootBoard podcast. It's the Visitor Information and Destination Marketing podcast, and I am Brian Reynolds, and with me is my co-host, Satya Shahade. Satya, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm also doing very well. We are very lucky today. We are being joined by the Executive Director at Discover Schenectady, that is Schenectady, New York, and with us today is Todd Garofano. Todd, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us today in this very cold. We are recording this in February, mid-February, and we just had a deep freeze. And so thankfully the power is still on for all of us, and we are here. And we're going to be talking destination marketing talk. And so, yeah, thank you for joining us today. Todd, just wanted to kind of get to know you a little bit more. Just kind of maybe an introduction of yourself and your experiences so far, and talk a little bit about your role at Discover Schenectady.
Yeah, so I'm fairly new in my role here at Discover Schenectady. I've been on the job for just a little over a month. Prior to that, I've spent many years in the tourism industry, over 30 years. I was president at Discover Saratoga for about 8 years. Saratoga Springs, New York, just up the road from us a little bit. But I spent a lot of time on the hotel side, global sales for Carlson Hotels worldwide. I was also a regional marketing manager with Amtrak, but really spent the majority of my career on the tourism side.
No, that's great. That's great. Yeah, Amtrak, that is very impressive, by the way. I'm always impressed whenever I see the trains go by. My son is really big right now on watching train footage, and every time he sees Amtrak, he recognizes the logo now. So I perk up every time I hear that. So tell me a little bit, what do you like about the destination marketing industry? Seems like a good fit, but just tell me what is things you like about it.
Yeah, there's always something different going on. Every day is never the same. So it's, we've kind of gone from destination marketing really to destination management over the last few years, really become more aligned with economic development, our partners on that side. And, as we market and manage destinations, we're keeping, just really, top of mind, everything that kind of goes into it. It's not just heads and beds anymore. It's really all about the destination and how you can have that positive influence on the local and regional economies.
That's pretty amazing that you say that, because I keep hearing about this transition, and this is almost an industry-wide transition. Some of them calling themselves not just DMOs, but DMMOs standing for Destination Marketing and Management Organizations. You have been in the industry long enough to have seen that transition, I would presume. Tell me how that came about. Like, what was the realization happening over the years, and tell our listeners, especially those who are new in this industry or who are thinking of joining, why it's important to think of destination management as much as marketing.
So a couple things. And, I think when the light bulb went off for me in Saratoga, so, Saratoga was kind of going through another, renaissance, if you will, and trying to attract new industry and, new business, try to diversify itself, if you will, not just a one horse town. Forgive the silks behind me.
Most literally. Yeah. Almost literally one horse town. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, trying to get away from that. And so, semiconductor was a big, target, for Saratoga County. And, we realized, and talking with our economic development partners, okay, you're trying to attract, this industry. What's a good way of getting, those decision makers into town, to see and experience everything that Saratoga has to offer, but conferences, meetings, so let's try to attract, semiconductor conferences and meetings and get those decision makers into town rather than just going out and trying to cold call and and invite folks in. So we're able to do that, and it really kind of led to a snowball effect. And the wheels were turning before all this happened as well. This just kind of helped the process. So long story short, fast forward 10 years, 12 years, 13 years later, Global Foundries is now here, employing over 3,500 people.
That's awesome.
Semiconductor chip manufacturer, but a foundry. So they manufacture chips for all sorts of companies and applications. So that was huge. Also, you think of management, you think of tourism product development, you think of sustainable tourism, not being overextended in tourism. So you're really trying to manage. You're not just out there selling, hey, everybody come to Saratoga all at once. We want you here. You're really trying to manage that process and manage what it is that you have to offer.
And also, I mean, the undercurrent I see is like having a core strategy and looking at what the core strengths of a region are, and then building upon that. It seems like that's what you guys did back at Saratoga Springs. In some ways, is that a fair assessment? Is that a fair way to see?
Yeah, and so we want to bring that same approach to Schenectady as well. And there was some great things happening in Schenectady. Obviously, before I got here, Schenectady is it's the original home for General Electric. You talk about innovation and that. I mean, Schenectady is. I mean, this is the hub. This was like the world's leader for that. And obviously you go through changes over the years, and the most recent past, we've seen a renaissance in downtown Schenectady with the development of Mohawk Harbor along the Mohawk River, Rivers Casino coming in, and with Schenectady Metroplex, which is our economic development arm, just doing an amazing job in redeveloping the downtown. So I see us coming in to complement what they have begun and partner with them. I talk about collaboration a lot. I say we a lot because it is we. It's all about all of us working together, to forge that success.
Yeah, and I was going to ask about that. Is like, how does compared to a destination marketing only, or an organization thinking of themselves as destination marketing only, compared to a management organization, how does your day change on a day-to-day basis? Are you doing a lot of conversations with your partners at the economic development and the county and the city? How does that differ?
I think one of the biggest takeaways I had from Saratoga, and what I'm trying to apply here also, is having those regular conversations. So having just getting together for coffee on a regular basis with our economic development folks, our downtown business improvement district folks, Chamber of Commerce, so all of those different organizations who all have their individual missions, but collectively we all have the same mission, right?
Yeah.
So let's just get around a table, have a cup of coffee with no agenda. Let's just have a conversation. What's going on in your world? All right, what's going on in your world? How can let's see what ideas kind of come from that, and how can we support one another?
Yeah, that feeds from one. And I imagine in a conversation like this, but it's almost an investment, is you're talking about multiple things, 60, 70, 80% of them don't go anywhere, but there's like this small percentage that are you're going to hit a chord, and then you guys end up doing great things together.
That's exactly it. And that's the goal.
Hey, Todd, I had a question.
Awesome.
I had a question about, so we've interviewed a few different types of DMOs and destinations. One of them, is a kind of more of a worker kind of focused, it's destination for workers, kind of traveling workers kind of situation. I want to get to know the clientele a little bit more for Schenectady. Can you talk a little bit more about what kind of destination the area serves, or what kind of, is it tourism kind of thing, or is it what kind of like the people who pass through, or that kind of experience that Schenectady serves?
Yeah, so it's definitely a mixed bag. So I mentioned General Electric, right? Everybody knows GE worldwide. So we still have a huge presence, with GE downtown, and even outside of downtown. We're still the home of their global research and development area, power generation. Now we have wind. So there's a huge GE component still. That aside, we also have, and we kind of talk about our pillars and our magnets. What does Schenectady have going for it? Most recently, we have, one of the state's very few full service casinos. So that was just built right on Mohawk Harbor, and it's opening up the whole Mohawk River, which is also the Erie Canal. So, which travels, all across the state into the Great Lakes and so forth. So the tourism component, as far as leisure tourism, is really, I don't want to say it at the beginning, but it's because it's not, but it's at a renaissance. It's coming back, right?
Mhm.
So, leisure is something that we definitely have, and whether it be families or folks coming to the casino, folks coming on the canal. We're also 2.5 hours north of New York City, 2.5, 3 hours south of Montreal, 2.5 hours to Boston, 3 hours to Boston, and 4 hours to Rochester, Buffalo, 5 hours to Buffalo. So we're kind of like right at that crossroads as well. So it's a great stopover, on your way to somewhere else. Spend a couple days, walk, around the stockade section, which is a very historic and one of the first historic destinations in the state. So we have that, and sports is huge. We have Union College right here, which is Division I hockey. So we really have a mixed bag. As far as meetings and conferences, we have facilities for that too. And again, kind of being in the center of the state, so the statewide association market is certainly big for us, because it's we can draw from all parts of the state.
The hometown I grew up in, it's it's in western Kansas, and if you live between Kansas City and Denver, it's right on I-70, and one of the big draws they have is like you're stopping on your way to Denver, or they have big conferences there that are drawn from like what you just discussed there. It's like a nice centralized location of if it's like anything western kind of area. So it sounds very similar to like an area I grew up in, where it's like all the Boston and New York and Buffalo and all the high populous areas, and if it's a centralized location, it's convenience. It sounds very convenient for that kind of experience.
Now, I always get amazed by, especially looking at the modern era of destination development, like last 10, 15 years, maybe 20 years, a lot of interesting things have happened. Cities and counties like yours have realized, hey, there's all these, like, let's say waterfront area that was used to be old warehouses for whatever reason. Philadelphia has the same exact thing. And now they're realizing, wait a minute, this could be real attractions that could be converted into really make it not just for visitors outside town, but even for citizens to come in and, live in there. And I think that draws in a lot of good, both from an economic development standpoint, but a visitor standpoint as well. My question to you is, for any destination, thinking of developing spaces, developing areas, and you have done this multiple times over, what are the steps they should start taking, right? What is it that they can start doing? And of course, everyone's going to take a different path, and they're going to muddle their way through. But what are some things to watch for? Like, if you want to throw a couple nuggets of advice there.
I would say start those conversations, get everybody around the table, start to have those coffee conversations and talk about, things that, and have your, one of the folks around that table that I didn't mention was our preservation folks as well. So, preserving those, those things, about your heritage, whether it's architecture or whatever it is. I mean, you want to be authentic, right? We want to have things that are authentic that will differentiate you from somebody else. But in terms of development like that, it's about having those conversations about just really kind of identifying what those assets are or what they could be. Waterfront is huge, and you're right. I mean, that's I hear that from so many different, destinations, not, in this area, but also around the state and around the country as well. And so, Schenectady's done a great job in starting to redevelop those areas and make them accessible, to your point, not only to visitors, but to residents alike, because it really kind of speaks to the quality of life. And, when you have that quality of life, then you can attract, people not only to visit, but to live and stay and work and so forth. So we're fortunate with the Mohawk River and our access to it. There's also trail systems that were recently just all connected statewide. So now we have the Empire Trail, right? So you can go from New York City to Schenectady to Buffalo, all along, the Mohawk corridor on your bike or what have you. So like biking is huge here now, and it has been, but now again, we're seeing that renaissance.
I have a question about the pandemic, and for those listening and those people in the area, if you're not familiar, we are in a pandemic. Last time I checked, still going on. And I'm just curious about how has Discover Schenectady adapted to the pandemic thus far, and what does spring and travel seasons are coming up. Obviously, we want to be safe and everything, but what does an opening up look like if we ever get to that point?
So it is all about health and safety, right? So it's all about conveying that message that Schenectady is safe to visit because of all the things that we're doing. So because of all the protocols, all the guidelines, that we're following from the state and from CDC, making sure that, our partners, with restaurants, hotels, inns, attractions, that they are following the guidelines. We have a pledge, as many other destinations do as well, from our partners as well as from our visitors. You agree to wear your masks, socially distant, we agree to do the same and clean and all those things. So, health and safety, I think that's going to be in all of our marketing and messaging and everything that we do, going forward for the foreseeable future. We're kind of inching along in terms of the reopening. So our casino is at 25% capacity, but they're open. Our outdoor attractions are doing relatively well. Hotels, we're open, and we're hoping for. We had some, a little bit of good news 2 weeks ago from the governor when they allowed weddings to increase to 150 people or 50% capacity of the venue that they're at. That starts March 15th, along with a lot of other, protocols, testing, and everything else. Individual county sign off on those events, things like that. But we're hoping that logic that they used for weddings will translate over to meetings and conferences and other social events as well. So we're able to, increase, capacity there. So we, every time the governor has an update, we're on it. We're watching, we're listening. We're working with our statewide association and their lobbyists to advocate, for our partners and for our industry. Using every little bit of knowledge, that we have, to, make sure that we do that in a safe manner. We're not being reckless by any means and just saying open it all up and we're ready, come on back. We want to make sure that people are going to be safe, and we're not going to have to shut it back down because of someone being reckless.
Right. Yeah, that's very important. I mean, getting that safety piece first, and of course everyone realizes it by now. I don't think that's something new here, but I think it is just, again, I would imagine getting coordinated with every other body and your partners in the region and the stakeholders in the region is so critical there. Todd, last time we talked, you said something that struck me, right? You talked about the quandary briefly, the quandary about whether or not to market the destination as you think about reopening. How are you making those decisions? How are you deciding how much to invest in marketing? And I'm sure there's some lessons learned from you to others, and then there's other people doing that. So what have you been seeing from the rest of the market?
Talking to a lot of folks, so whether they're around the state or around the country, fortunately we have good industry associations like Destinations International. We've got groups like Longwoods who put out great information, studies they're doing all the time, looking at future travel trends. When are people saying that, they, when, will they feel like, they're ready to travel? Do they feel like they're ready to travel? And where do they think they would want to go? So we're listening to a lot of those reports and basing a lot of our decisions on that. We're also talking to, our local hoteliers, seeing how, all right, well, what's the summer starting to look like? Are you starting to pick up? Where are they coming from? So we're using a lot of research, a lot of statistics to try to drive those decisions. And so, cautiously, we're looking at, a summer campaign, that'll largely be targeting our regional audience, regional, but yet still the 2.5, 3 hour drive distance.
3 hour drive, yeah.
Yep. So targeting that, and then looking, further ahead to the fall. We still have, Proctor's Theater is a huge economic driver for Schenectady. It's just a beautiful facility right in downtown, and they attract all the big Broadway shows once they go out on the road. But even before that, so when Broadway shows are preparing to go out on the road, oftentimes they'll come to Proctor's in Schenectady to do a tech, if you will. So they'll start to kind of build their show to be prepared to go on the road. So they'll stay with us, 3-4 weeks as they do that. And then, typically in years past, they would Frozen, for instance, was just here 2 years ago. And, as they prepare to go out on the road. And so, just before they go out on the road, they'll do a series of shows here. So, whether it's a week and a half. Now, because of the restrictions, the feeling is, they probably won't be, they being Proctor's, be able to open to a full capacity this year still, maybe in the fall, but we don't know. I mean, right now they're not open at all. So if that's the case, then, it may not make sense for them to open their doors and go through that expense, but we still want that tech here. So they're still, those shows are still going to go on the road. So, if we can attract, 4 or 5 of those, here this year, so that's going to generate, room nights. It's going to generate some economic, activity still. And we want that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And Brian, if you don't mind, one question that came off that, talking about local attractions like Proctor's and even local businesses for that matter, obviously have been heavily impacted by this pandemic. How are you as the local authority working with these stakeholders, working with the local businesses? What are the programs that either you're toying with the idea or you have already started in terms of helping them get back up to speed, if there are any? And of course, visitor information on the back end, like how are you you talked about safety and other things. How are you going to get some of the information to visitors who are within the region, or have you started thinking about those things when things open up?
Yeah. So in terms of helping local businesses, we certainly, use our reach, to get their messaging out. So whether it's social media channels, newsletters, what have you, whether it's, promoting, restaurant takeout, programs or any kind of promotions they have, local, shop local, supporting local business. So doing all those things that we can. There's a couple of new promos that just came out. One is Split the Bill. So, a couple of, a food distributor and a beverage distributor got together and, designate a day, come dine in, our restaurants on this Thursday, and we're going to split the bill with you. So you, the customer. So, we'll split the bill up to, $50.
Awesome.
So, which is pretty cool, right? So, person goes in, has a great dinner, they take a picture of it, they, post on social media with a hashtag, and then they go on to the website, have a picture of their receipt also, and then that diner gets reimbursed, for up to $50, which is great. And it doesn't come out of the restaurant's pocket, it comes out of, those sponsors, who are doing that. So really great initiative. So we're, hopping on board, with things like that.
That's awesome.
In terms of hotels, we have a lot of, obviously, and we're doing it. It looks like, the three of us today, we're all working from home, right? So, you have a lot of people who are working from home, who just want to get out of their house. They want to work somewhere else, so we have hotels that are doing, work from here, packages kind of a thing. So, bring your we got Wi-Fi, we got a coffee maker, we have water, come work in a hotel room for the day and, just get out of your house. And then you can enjoy the pool, restaurant, everything else, all the other amenities that property has to offer. So we're, promoting those things as well. And then, kind of looking towards the future, like I said, we're looking at a couple of close in campaigns that will be targeting the local area. We're doing a promotion now for meetings, knowing that as meetings are starting to happen again, most oftentimes they're hybrid in functions. So you've got some people that are live, and then you've got a bunch of people who are on Zoom or whatever other mechanism they have but they're remote. So that obviously leads to increased AV costs. So we're offering an incentive for new business booked, in this year, for this year. We'll cover up to $500 of your AV costs, for groups with a minimum of 100 room nights, that kind of a thing. So doing different incentives, to help that side as well.
That's great.
That's awesome. That's
all right.
Awesome.
All right, Todd, one last question. Thank you for your time once again, for joining us. I know I have one more question I really need to get across to you, as this one's very curious to me. What would you say is Discover Schenectady's biggest needs, and how do you accomplish those needs?
Yeah, so, well, we can always use more funding.
Give us your list.
Money. There's money.
We can always use more money. That's for sure. We're very fortunate, I will say, because I know so many of my colleagues in this industry have, they've just been devastated. We're all, basically driven one way or another by a bed tax, right? That's what funds organizations like ours. But when you have nobody staying in your hotels, you're not generating that bed tax. So your budget is really under attack. Mm-hmm. Those who have healthy reserves, those who have a more diversified funding stream, not just bed tax, I think are doing a little bit better. Those who are in, destinations that have great outdoor attractions, the ski areas are doing great right now up north. Yeah. So they're doing okay. For us, we're fortunate in that, our bed tax gets funneled through the county, through Schenectady County, and then they distribute the funds to us, as well as proctors and other tourism, related functions. But they're behind us, 100%. So they did not cut our funding through all of this. We're whole, which is great. We've got a healthy reserve, but at the same time, there's opportunity for more. So if we're able to increase our funding, through whatever mechanism it is, I think the stat was before the pandemic, I don't know if it still is, but for every dollar spent in tourism marketing, you can expect $9 to come back to your local economy.
Wow.
So that's a huge, ROI, right? So the more we can, promote and market, the more that's going to come back to us. But, it kind of goes back to the earlier point, when's the right time to get out and spend on tourism marketing and promotion. So we want to be very careful and just careful and just, be mindful of how we're spending those dollars and where and when.
Exactly.
I think Satya.
I mean, Todd has so many good nuggets. It just kind of drives some more questions on my end. Sorry about that, Todd. But talking about funding and this model, which is very, looking at the tax dollars. Obviously, those tax dollars from hotels, beds and heads is not going to go away. But do you think your industry or our industry will generally start looking at augmenting some sources of revenue, given that now that the pandemic has happened and, the loss of revenue is so fresh in everybody's mind?
It really exposed us all, this pandemic. It really, kind of showed you just how fragile that model is. There are some different mechanisms out there now. There's tourism improvement districts. Now there are tourism recovery improvement districts, kind of rebranding there. It's still based on bed tax though, but it kind of puts the control back into the DMO and not in the government. Because, let's be honest, I mean, Schenectady County could have said, listen, you're funded by bed tax and there's no bed tax. We can't afford to float you guys. Thank God they didn't. But there's places around the country that had that experience, and, and it's shuttered. It's either led to a lot of layoffs and a lot of heartache, or it's, significantly reduced their capacity. So we absolutely have to look at different funding mechanisms. So, been very pleased partnering with you guys, and, the opportunity that the kiosks kind of provide us to do that, in the future. So we're looking at that. We're looking at monetizing our website more, those types of things. But we absolutely have to get creative and look at different funding mechanisms.
Different funding mechanisms going forward. That's really good. Brian, are we? What else do we have?
I think that was the final question there, Satya. And I want to point out that Satya had a very insightful. I remember he and I were talking a while ago, and I remember Satya saying that as soon as safely and secure, and everyone, I think there's going to be a floodgate of people who are going to make up for lost time and not being able to travel around. They're probably, I think it's kind of example of when you talked about like people working from home. We've been cooped up for almost we're looking at a year now, and I think when it becomes safe and to get out, all that time that was lost in the areas and the DMOs, they're going to be making up for some and then some.
And to that, I mean, I'm glad you bring that up, Brian, because to that, I think more importantly, it's not about the 6-month fatigue or a year-long fatigue. I think people have realized to their core how to look at what we value, right? Like, what are we, we have realized, we have seen some of our closest family members. Thankfully, my family it still has scraped by. The pandemic is still on, but some of us lost our closest team, like family members. And we are now, okay, where should I be investing my time? Can I be going out, traveling with them? Can I be spending more time with them? And I think people are just going to come out of this with an entirely new attitude towards life. That's just me. I know I'm usually optimistic about things, but I think I'm ready. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people are. So I don't know, Todd, what was your take on that?
I think you're absolutely right. We've experienced it, ourselves, my wife and I, and, just kind of looking at our past habits and, just the grind, that you get into day to day, and having spent so much time home and with each other and not killing each other yet.
Not
but you start, you realize, we've been doing this all wrong, and it's an opportunity to break that cycle and
break that habit.
And just change the way you live. So
that's
be more appreciative.
I do, Brian. I do have one parting question. I want to give Todd the opportunity to explain what's the T-shirt behind him, and for our listeners who are going to be listening to this on a podcast, Todd has a frame of a black frame with an orange T-shirt with a black diamond on top of it. He just pointed his camera. Todd, here's a opportunity to plug your region. I know it's the neighboring one, but that's fine.
Yeah, it's funny because everybody thinks, well, you have to change your office from Discover Saratoga to Discover Schenectady. But so behind me, that's those are actually racing silks. So my wife and I are part of a racing group called Manhattan Racing Stable, and so we've been part of it now for maybe 15 years. So it's a group of people that buy into ownership shares of racehorses. So we were never the country club type or, you know, that kind of thing, but we love going to the races and we love going to polo. But a friend, you know, approached us a while back, friend of a friend, and, you know, said, you know, this is a great social activity, great, you know, fun thing to do. It's not really expensive, and it really wasn't to get in. So, you know, for whatever, you know, it can be as little as 2,500, you know, you can have a percentage of a racehorse. And so being right here in Saratoga in our backyard, you know, it just made sense. And we've been into it ever since. And I mean, the big thing is, you know, we go to the back stretch. We, you know, we go in the stalls and, you know, go see the horses and get up close to the trainers and, you know, jockeys and all that stuff. So it's been a lot of fun. We've won a few times. We've actually won at Saratoga, which was great.
That's awesome.
Saratoga is, if you don't know it, it's the oldest operating sports venue in the country. Over 150 years old. It's our, you know, it's our Yankee Stadium. Our, you know, the average, you know, 20,000 fans a day over a 40-day meet. So you think about that, it's more than the Knicks or the Rangers or, you know, anybody like that, you know, averages. So it's a lot of fun. You can go there, you sit in the backyard with your shorts and a t-shirt on, you bring your cooler full of beer, or you know, or you like my wife, you put the hat on, you know, you dress up, you do all that too, and you know, you can have a different experience every time you go.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
Well, Todd Garofano, Executive Director of Discover Schenectady, thank you for joining us today on the HootBoard Visitor Information and Destination Marketing Podcast. It's been a joy talking to you. We've learned a lot, and really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you, guys. I enjoyed it too, and now it's time to go out and snow blow again.
Snow blow. There you go.
All right.
It was fun.
Thanks, guys.
All right, guys.